everybody, Pastor Hans here, and thank you so much for worshiping with us today, especially if this is your first time with us. We are in the midst of a worship series that we are calling We Are Calvary. We're pausing for a few weeks to wonder, what is God calling us as the church to do and to be? What's the mission of the church? Where are we going? We've been talking about how the mission of the church is to lead all people to a lifelong faith in Jesus Christ. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about what does it mean to lead? If God calls us to lead others to faith, well, what does it mean to lead? In the second week, we talked about, well, what does it mean that we're called to lead all people? Who do we mean when we say all people? Do we really mean all people? And today, we're exploring what it means to lead people to a lifelong faith. The question for today is this: how do we experience, how do we pass on, how do we share a faith that's lasting, a lifelong faith? Hey everybody, here's what I know is true. There are things in our lives that come and then they go. Things come and then things go. For example, let's talk about phones. Anybody remember the rotary dial phone? You had one of those on your counter, or you had it on that little end table. You'd stick your finger in it and rotate. Well, eventually you had to trade that in because they had these new phones that hung on the wall. Remember those? They had that cord. Kids, can you imagine? You couldn't leave the room with the phone because it was attached to the wall. Then came along this new invention. It was called a cell phone, but they were really big. Remember these bag phones? Really cool people had bag phones that they carried around in their car. Eventually, the phones started getting a little bit smaller. We had a phone that looked like that, a little hard to put in your pocket. So Motorola, they developed this phone. And the phones from that point just got a little bit smaller and then a little bit smaller. This is the flip phone. How many of you had a flip phone? Some of you grandpas, you still have your flip phone. Your grandkids, listen to them. They're telling you it's time to upgrade. Along the way, there was this new kind of phone that was introduced. Some call it a BlackBerry. It had these little buttons so you could type on the phone. And before long, this guy by the name of Steve Jobs changed the world by introducing us to the iPhone. Here's the thing about phones and so many things in our lives. There are things that come and there are things that go. Let's talk about music, for example. Music. There was a day and age where if you wanted to listen to music, you would huddle around your transistor radio and listen to music in the evening. Maybe along the way, when you were a teenager, you purchased one of these things, a record player, because now you could have recorded music on these vinyl discs, and you could play music at whatever music you wanted, whenever you wanted. In the 70s, maybe you upgraded to one of these things, the good old 8-track player. And then in the 90s, maybe you got one of these, a boom box, and you played your music on a cassette. Before long, maybe you then upgraded to a CD player. And then in the late 90s, there came along this thing called Napster, where you could download music onto your computer. Can you even believe it? And then today, how do most of us listen to music? Well, we use this app called Spotify. Isn't it true for so many things in our lives? There are things that come and there are things that go. You probably, somewhere in your basement, you just can't let go of your VCR and that collection of VHS tapes. There are things that come and things that go. Some of you moms, you probably at one time or another, you had a Tupperware party. Things come, things go. Many of us in college, the way we survived college was with a George Foreman grill. And if you grew up of a different vintage, I'm quite certain you're having a hard time letting go of your fondue pot. You just can't let go of it, even though you can't remember the last time you used it. In all of our lives, here's what's true. There are things that come and there are things that go. Things come and things go. Well, here's what I think is true. Far too often in our lives, the same is true for faith. Many of you, maybe you were brought to church as a youngster. You were taught the faith, you were brought to Sunday school, maybe even brought to confirmation. But something about that faith, it didn't stick. It sort of came and then it went. And if that wasn't the case for you, I'm guessing it's true for somebody you love, that you care for. Maybe a son, maybe a daughter, maybe a grandson or a granddaughter. Faith sort of came and then it went. And so today what I want to wonder with you about is this question. There are a lot of things that just don't last in our world. You know this is true. There's a lot that doesn't last. But what if you could have a faith that does last? A faith that stands the test of time. Hey, we're in the midst of a worship series, and during this series, we have been wondering about the church. What is God calling us to do and to be as the church? Or to put it another way, what is the mission of the church? We're pausing because we have been through a lot the last couple of years. We've experienced COVID, we've experienced racial unrest, politics like we've never seen before. And it's changed us, and it's changed us as a church. And so we're pausing for a few weeks to ask the question, where are we going? A couple of weeks ago, we began this series, and we sort of laid out the mission of the church. What's the purpose of the church? Why did God create the church? And we discovered that the mission of the church is this. It's to lead all people to a lifelong faith in Jesus Christ. To lead all people to a lifelong faith in Jesus Christ. And so a couple of weeks ago, we began this series by asking the question, what does it mean to lead? If we are, as a church, called to lead people somewhere, what does it mean to lead? And we talked about how leading can be hard from time to time, because as leaders, we will face resistance. If we're going to reach people no one else is reaching, we're going to have to sometimes do things no one else is doing, and we're going to experience resistance. We're going to, at times, have to put aside our preferences. We're going to have to make sacrifices for the sake of those maybe who are far from the church and far from faith. But here's what we know. God uses each one of us to lead other people. Then week 2 of the series, we wondered if we're to lead all people to a lifelong faith in Jesus Christ, do we really mean all people? And we looked at the story of Noah last week, and we found out that Noah wasn't a perfect character, but God used him to fill this boat with all the creatures of the earth. And we wondered, just maybe the boat that Noah filled is a great image for us as a church, that God is calling us to fill this church with every different sort of creature God has placed on this planet. Well, today we're going to wonder about this third line of the mission statement, to lead all people to a lifelong faith. And the question for today goes like this: how do I experience a lifelong faith? If we as the church are called to lead others to a lifelong faith in Jesus Christ, well, what does a lifelong faith look like? How do I experience it? There are a whole lot of things that I love in this world, but some of my favorite things, they all have three ingredients. Three ingredients. For example, I love peanut butter cookies. My mom's peanut butter cookie recipe had three ingredients. It included peanut butter, eggs, and sugar. That's what it takes to make a good peanut butter cookie. I also love mac and cheese. I haven't grown up yet, huh? Mac and cheese, what's in mac and cheese? Well, in college, this is how I did it. I got the box, right? And in the box are noodles, that strange powdery cheese stuff, and then you dump a little milk in, and you have got mac and cheese. Three ingredients. I also hate to admit this, but every once in a while, I love a margarita. What's in a margarita? You have a little tequila, a little bit of lime juice, a little bit of orange liqueur. Right? That's how you make a margarita. Some of my favorite things include three ingredients. And here's what I want to suggest today, that a lifelong faith, a faith that lasts the test of time, it also has three ingredients. If you want to pass on a faith to the next generation, if you want to share a faith with the people you love, if you want to experience a lifelong faith, that lifelong faith has to include three ingredients. And with the time I have left, I want to talk to you about those three ingredients. The first ingredient to a lifelong faith looks like this. The first ingredient is worship. Why do we say that that's the first and maybe the most important ingredient to a lifelong faith? Well, because it's in worship. As we gather together week after week after week, it's in worship that we are reminded, who am I? Who am I? Every week, maybe it seems redundant some week, again and again, we're telling one another, you are a child of God. You have a God who loves you, a father, a mother. You have a God who loves you just the way you are. With all your pains and all your problems and all your past, this God loves you just the way you are. This God knows you and cares about you regardless of what your life looks like. King David wrote these words. In Psalm 139, he said, you, God, you knit me together in my mother's womb. You watched me as I was being formed. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life is recorded in your book. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. The most important thing about worship is that it's in worship that we remember who we are. That we are children of God, that we are loved just as we are. Folks, isn't that what we want everyone we care about to know? Isn't that what we want our sons and daughters to know? Our grandsons, our grandkids, our neighbors, our aunts, our uncles, our grandfathers, our grandmothers. We want them to know that they are loved just as they are. That is the message of the church. That's the message we tell week after week in worship. And so if that's true, that that's the message, and we're going to get that across whatever way we possibly can, then here's what's true for us as the church. The message is more important than the method. Let me say that again. The message is more important than the method when it comes to worship. If you've been around the church for a while, you know that we church people sometimes have a reputation for disagreeing about methods, about the means of getting the message across, right? Church people argue sometimes about music. What kind of music should we have in worship? About things like liturgy, about things like programs. Should we have our kids memorize things or should we not? We disagree about the means, about the methods. Even though we all would agree about the message, that what we want each and every person who comes through the door or tunes in online to know that they are a cherished child of God. What's maybe comforting to know is that we aren't the only ones who have disagreed about this. Way back in the ancient world Jesus lived in, he was having a conversation with a woman who was a Samaritan. Jesus was a Jew. This woman was a Samaritan. Here's how the conversation went. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is for the Jews. What's this about? Well, Jews and Samaritans never agreed on religious things. They always had all these disagreements about how they should worship and the ways they should worship. And one of the biggest disagreements they had was about where they should worship. Jews believed that the center of worship was the temple, whereas Samaritans believed that the center of worship was this mountaintop, Mount Gerizim. Jews believed that God resided at the temple, while Samaritans believed God lived on this mountaintop. They disagreed. And so, what does Jesus say to sort of resolve this conflict? He goes on to say, "Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth." What is Jesus saying here? He's saying basically what you and I have just said. The message is more important than the method, than the means, than the place, than the how. The message is what's most important, that message is conveyed in spirit and in truth, that all people might know who they are, that they are children of God. What's the first ingredient to a lifelong faith? The first ingredient is this: worship. Second ingredient number 2, if you want to pass on a lifelong faith to someone else, you want to experience a lifelong faith, the second ingredient looks like this: it's to serve. Because it's when we serve our neighbor, when we take care of those who are in need, that we discover why God created us, what our purpose is. Paul wrote these words in the book of Ephesians: "For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast." Now listen to this: "For we are what he has made us, created in Christ Jesus for" what? For good works. God created you and me for good works, to care for those around us. Jesus gets explicit about this. He says, "I give you a new command, that you would love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you" what? "If you love one another." I've always wanted to be a fly fisherman. In fact, my wife, quite a few years ago, she gave me a fly fishing rod, a really nice one. I've taken fly fishing lessons multiple times. I've got all the gear. I've got the waders. I've got the cool little fly boxes. I've got plenty of flies. I've got the cool boots. I've got all the gear. I've gone to little fly shops and hung out with guys who know a whole lot more about fly fishing than me. I've been to Shields and Cabela's and hung out in the fly fishing sections of those stores. Folks, I've even watched A River Runs Through It about 100 times. But do you know how many times I've actually been fly fishing? 2. Just 2 times. Here's the thing: I'm not a fly fisherman. Here's the truth about it. You can't be a fly fisherman unless you actually fly fish. And here's what I think is true for us. What's true for us: God invited us. Jesus told us, "Here's what I want you to do. Here's why I created you, to love one another." Here's the truth. Just like I can't be a fly fisherman unless I actually fish, well, here's the truth about you and me. You can't love your neighbor until you actually love your neighbor. You'll never discover your purpose in life, why God created you, until you actually do it. You can't actually love your neighbor until you actually love your neighbor. Hey, folks, here's the second ingredient. The first ingredient to a lifelong faith is worship. Second one is serve. And finally, the last ingredient to a lifelong faith is to connect. To get connected with people who share the faith, who have the same questions, the same doubts, who are wondering about the same things as you when it comes to faith. Because it's in connecting with others that you discover, where do I belong? Where do I belong? In fact, we believe here at Calvary that this is true. You'll never grow spiritually until you are connected relationally. You'll never grow spiritually until you're connected relationally with a group of people that you can wonder about what God is up to in this world and in your life. The author of the book of Hebrews said this: "And let us be concerned about one another in order to promote love and good works, not staying away from one another, but encouraging each other. In fact, when the first church formed, the book of Acts records the story. And it says this: now all the believers were what? Together. They held all things in common. Every day they devoted themselves to meeting together. And they broke bread from house to house. They ate their food together with joyful and humble hearts, praising God and having favor for all the people. The church flourished. People grew in faith. Why? Because they shared life together. They shared it together. When I was a kid, it was the era of Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Spud Webb, Larry Bird. I wanted nothing more than to be a great basketball player. But I have to admit something to you. I was a terrible basketball player as a kid. And I certainly wasn't tall enough. At my tallest, I was 5'7", people. I was no good. I spent a lot of time on the bench. In fact, my freshman year of high school, the basketball coach put his arm around me and walked me down the hallway and introduced me to the wrestling coach. You see, as a kid, when it came to basketball, I spent a lot of time on the bench. And here's the truth. When you spend a lot of time on the bench watching other people play, you never feel as though you belong. Here's what I wonder. If there's a lot of us, when it comes to church, we gather in buildings and we sit on the benches, right? We sit out in these pews. And all the while we do that, we watch other people who are in the game, other people who are playing. And I think often we think, well, I don't know if I belong. I don't know if I'm good enough to be a part of that team. You see, we all need a team in order to grow. We all need a team we can play with, if you will, when it comes to the life of faith. Because it's when we're connected relationally that we grow spiritually. And if you're not green and growing, well, the truth is you're probably brown and dying when it comes to your faith. You see, here's what we believe with all our heart. You'll never grow spiritually until you are connected relationally. Folks, you want a lifelong faith. You want to pass on a lifelong faith. Here's the secret sauce. Here's the recipe. There are 3 ingredients: worship, serve, and connect. Now, here's what I know. There are a lot of things in your life that have come and gone. Some of you really miss your calculator watch you had back in the 80s. For others of you, you long for your first gaming system, that old Atari. And still others of you, you remember the days when you had that Polaroid camera and you'd shake the little piece of whatever that was to get the picture to show up. There are things in our lives that have come and they have gone. But what if? What if we could instill in ourselves and in other people a faith that is lasting? You see, there's a lot that doesn't last. But what if you could have a faith that does last?
Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true.
'Cause I am found, I am yours, I am loved, I'm made pure, I have life, I can breathe, I am healed, I am free.
Here's my heart, Lord. Thank you so much for joining us for worship today. Please join us in praying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in today. If this is your first time with us, again, we want you to know how grateful we are that you chose to spend this time with us. And we'd love to get connected with you. One of the easiest ways for you to take sort of a next step, if you will, is to head out to our website, calvaryalec.org, and there, click on the button that says sign up for emails. Every week we send out an email on Friday letting you know of all the opportunities to get engaged and where we're going, what we're up to as a church. Whether you are brand new to our church or been around forever, it's the best way to stay informed as to all that's going on here at Calvary. Very soon, Easter is coming. Can you believe it? The sun is shining outside today, and so we are thinking all about Easter. You can see on the screen our Easter times. If you choose to worship in person with us, we'd love to welcome your family. We got all kinds of tricks up our sleeve for Easter. It's going to be a great day to celebrate the gift of resurrection. We're going to have a photo booth, and we can't wait to welcome you and your family here to church. Please join us. We'll also have a service online that you can watch anytime all weekend long. Second thing I want to invite you to do is help us invest in our students. We have a group of high school students that's taking a trip up to Rainy Lake this summer. Why are they taking a trip to Rainy Lake? They're gathering up there for a houseboat trip where we're going to spend a week having fun, playing out on the lake, fishing, eating great food, but most importantly, we're going to pour into those high school kids. We're going to hope to pass on to them a lifelong faith, the sort of faith we talked about today. You can share in that ministry, support those students and adults who are going up for that faith formative experience by participating in what we call our Shares program. We want to invite you to consider making a donation to support our young people as they go on this big and important adventure in their faith journey. As we close our time together today, I want to first say thank you for joining us. Number two, I want us to pause for a moment and just step back and look at all God has blessed us with. We are fortunate people. And so I want to pause for a time when we can give thanks to God, but also give back to God. As we close our service, we invite you to make your offerings in one of the several ways on the screen. You can go to our website, calvaryalec.org, and there click on the Give button. You can sign up to make a one-time or a reoccurring gift. The other way you can make your gift is simply by using your Venmo app on your phone. It's probably the easiest way to make a gift. You can write a check and throw it in the mail, send it to the address on the screen, or if you're just not sure how to make your gift, feel free to give us a call in the church office. We would love to talk to you about the ways that you can live out the generous life that God is calling you and me to. Folks, thanks for being the church. It's so great to be with you today. Have a great week.